I'm Mary Sue Lanigan, and I'm with Michigan Parkinson Foundation. I look to see who's on the call tonight, and we all know most of each other. Welcome. Tonight we've got Crystal Schilling. She is a social worker. She's president and CEO of Perinatal Pediatric Psychotherapist with the Lilith Wellness Center for Women and Children. And she's going to talk to us tonight about tips for talking to kids about chronic illness and disease. And this topic comes up quite often. So we're just really delighted that Crystal is willing to take some time to spend with us this evening. I'm going to go in and I'm going to mute everybody. And then Crystal, you're going to have to unmute yourself, okay? I got to get back to where the people are. All right. Let's see. I've muted everybody. And now, Crystal, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're good.
Oh, good. So good evening, everyone. My name is Crystal. I am indeed a social worker who graduated in 2012 from Wayne State University. I specialize in working with women and children. I do a lot with play therapy. And primarily, I work with kids who have experienced significant trauma. So I get a lot of abuse, neglect, but I also get a lot of kiddos who are dealing with death, loss, grief, from various things, some of which have been chronic illness. So I know when I was approached to do this presentation, I kind of geared it towards all chronic illnesses, not just Parkinson's. So, I know a little bit about Parkinson's, not a whole lot, but honestly, kids don't care. They want to know that you're going to be okay. And honestly, that's the main thing, right? Talking to kids, how to talk to them, and how to talk to them in a developmentally appropriate way so that we're not frightening them. So let's see a little bit about, okay, so when you're talking about a family member who is ill, the thought of explaining that serious illness to a child seems like really overwhelming, especially if you're still dealing with that and processing it yourself. But by sharing appropriate information, you're actually giving them the power, because knowledge is power, right? We trust that adults will give the information to the child that they need. We want the child to be able to work through their own feelings, but we also want the person who is experiencing the illness to have worked through that as well. So you don't want to come to a child when you're still grappling with the issue yourself. The more information that you have about the illness and what you're facing, and the more that you have processed that with yourself and or loved ones, family members, other professionals, the easier it's going to be when you talk to the child about it. We want to make sure that the child knows that they are included in those conversations and not isolated. Too oftentimes I hear from kids like, I know that something's going on and mom and dad are telling me. They whisper all the time, but they're not including me in the conversation. When I walk in the room, they tell me it's not anything for them to worry about. Kids are super smart and they're very, very receptive. They know the slightest bit of tension. They know the slightest bit of sorrow and sadness. They know when something is wrong. So even if you are not fully prepared to have that conversation, letting them know that it's something that you're still grappling with would probably be the best way to go, as opposed to saying things like, oh, you don't need to know. It's not anything that you need to know. That makes them feel like you're keeping secrets, and they don't like that. We also want to make sure that the kids feel safe asking questions, and we want them to be able to help in their own way. So usually for kids, they're very hands-on. They want to advocate. They want to help do research. They want to talk to other people about the illness and educate them. Those are all really important things that, they can contribute as well. As long as your child has verbal skills, there are ways to communicate about the illness, treatments, and if appropriate, the prognosis. The amount of information that a child can handle is obviously going to depend on her stage of development. So after we've come to terms with our diagnosis, talking to kids so that they will listen and not be afraid. We want to make sure that we are working with a professional if you have questions or concerns about how to present things. You know, even if you are not working with a therapist yourself, I would encourage you to reach out to somebody that you know that's in the field, sending an email to maybe a school social worker that you know the child is close to, reaching out to additional supports for the children just so that everybody is on the same page, and then kind of offering them some, you know, asking for some advice. How do you think that this would best be managed? Of course, if they're a professional. Peers are just going to tell you to do what you think is best. But social workers, especially school social workers, if they're on board, if they know that something is going on at home, they're going to be all over that support for those kiddos when they come to school. It's very important for them to be on board too. So let's see, moving on. Some tips for talking to kids, especially some questions that might be very personal. You want to prepare yourself because kids have no filter. Honest to God, they don't. They're going to ask you exactly what is on their mind, no holds barred. They aren't going to sugarcoat it. They're not going to take no for an answer either. So before you have a conversation with the child, you're going to want to make sure that you make a list of anything that you can think of that they might want to know, and then try to prepare what you might say, like rehearse it. I do it all the time. If I know that I'm going to be grappling with a difficult subject with a kid, I might kind of, you know, jot down some notes and things that I think that they're going to ask questions about, and then maybe come up with some responses or how I might respond in those situations. Any parents out there, you know, I've always been worried about that conversation when the child comes and wants to know about the birds and the bees. Not exactly something that we as parents love to talk about, but we all know that those types of questions are going to come up. So kind of having a pat response, or, you know, figuring out what you might say and what might work better for the child, that would be really, really helpful. So when you're planning for the conversation, we want to think about when and where to have it. So if you know that your child that you're going to be speaking with does not function very well in the morning, obviously you're not going to want to have that conversation at the breakfast table. You're not going to want to have that conversation before bed. You want to think very carefully about where it might be best to have that conversation. Think about what you want to say. I always have important conversations with my kids in one of two places, either in the car because there's no escape, or at the dinner table, again, because there's no escape. And I have a rule that they're not allowed to have cell phones or any electronic devices at the table. So I know that I have their undivided attention. You know, so obviously I would encourage you to do that, but also talking with other adults, doing some role playing, looking at some other resources online. I know when I was doing some research for this presentation tonight, Michael J. Fox had some excellent pointers on his website about how to talk to kids that I thought were incredibly helpful. You're also going to want to be aware of your tone and your body language, because kids pick up on that stuff. I think one of the reasons that makes me such an amazing therapist for kids is because I'm kind of like a little kid myself, even though I'm not a little kid. I relate on that level with them. I make sure that I'm down on their level. I'm making direct eye contact with them. I am smiling. I'm approachable. And, you know, if they're sitting on the floor, I'm sitting on the floor. Sometimes it's harder for me to get up, but I'm definitely sitting on the floor. So you want to think about the audience, right? If you're talking to a little kid, sometimes they might feel more comfortable sitting on the floor, having their favorite stuffed animal, or, you know, being by one of their favorite toys. Whereas with you're talking with a teenager, that's going to look a little bit different. They're not necessarily going to have to be in those kinds of hands-on, face-to-face, right, intentional, they're not going to necessarily need that. You're going to be lucky if they make eye contact with you as a teenager, honestly. So starting the conversation, we want to make sure that we keep it simple, right? We don't want to go into a lot of hardcore details right off the bat. So something that you could say is like, we're sad because Pop is sick. In this example, I said he has a disease called diabetes. We're visiting the doctor a lot so that we can learn how to take care of him. So you're giving the child the information, but you're also giving them time to process it, right? Observe the reaction, respond honestly, and be reassuring. They need all of those things. So pertinent information that you're going to want to provide obviously depends on the age of your child, but consider sharing things like the name of the disease, ways that the child can help, changes that might be made to the environment. So, if there are additional ramps or, stairs that need to be taken down, those kinds of conversations can be had so that they have a better understanding of what to expect in their environment. Every kid that I've ever spoken with wants to know, is it contagious? Is it something that I can get? Is it like Corona? So, those are questions that you're going to want to be prepared for as well. Letting them know that there's going to be changes in the household, working as a team. Kids need to know that they're a part of it as far as what they can do hands-on, right? So if there are specific tasks or assignments or things that helpful with, let them know. It would be really helpful if you could keep your toys picked up off the floor so that we're not tripping over them. It would be really helpful if you could push your chair in when you're done eating. Those kinds of very specific directives, they'll take right to it. If they've got a job to do, they're going to do it because they want to help, right? Another thing that I've seen a lot of, I think particularly with people that I work with that have cancer, they get a lot of stares, a lot of people pointing, a lot of people whispering, so if that is something that you are afraid is going to come up, obviously talking to your kids about it ahead of time, and benefit of the doubt, we're going to say they're just doing that because they're curious, not that they're rude. They're not intentionally trying to be rude. And it's okay. People are going to look, and it's okay. They can look and they can ask questions, and we'll be honest and we'll answer them. So that directive usually works better than, I don't know what they're staring at. They're very rude. Even though you might be thinking that internally, don't say it out loud to the kids. Teaching them to talk to others about the diagnosis so that they can be informed, because again, knowledge is power. Telling them that it's okay if you want to talk to other people about it, like a friend, a family member, or even a therapist that they're already working with. And then if you need support, making sure that you seek out a therapist who specializes in chronic illness, disease, and or a therapist who specializes in working with children. You don't want to take your child to see an adult therapist because that conversation is going to look a lot different. I do a lot with play therapy because I find that kids do a lot better in communicating when they are able to play. They show me a lot through that. So I do something called sand tray, and with sand tray, my kiddos tell me a story. So they set up a story in a sand tray with all these little characters. And while they're telling me this story, they're also telling me a lot about what's going on in their life. Conflicts that are coming up or fights that they're having at home. All of that comes out in their storytelling and through their play. And those of us who work with kids and who are certified in that, we know those things to look for. If you take those kiddos to somebody who's like a family therapist that doesn't specialize in working with children, they're not going to know. And so you want to make sure whoever the kiddos see, they're working with somebody who speaks their language, right? And then, of course, making sure that they know they can come and talk to you anytime that they have questions, right? That's super important. Let's see. Being sure to allow plenty of time for questions. using appropriate terms. So with younger kids, Michael J. Fox's website points out with younger kids using terms like PD or tremors or the shakes is actually more helpful than trying to enforce the Parkinson's disease. They're going to say it a million times wrong, right? But if you say the shakes or the tremors or something like that, it might make it easier for them to remember and to apply. With older kids and teens, you can definitely use the more technical or medical terms when you're speaking to them. Using everyday language, making sure that you provide suggestions on ways that they can learn more. So that would be another thing that I encourage all of the kiddos that I work with to do. You know, if you have a question, write it down. I always have them keep a journal, write down your questions. And then if you can't find out the answers to those questions, I'll help you. I'll help you research that. We can research it together. I can link you up with some support groups. There's some really amazing support groups out there for kiddos, you know, so making sure that you're linking up to the right one. And if you have any questions, you know, again, ask a therapist and social worker. We know pretty much all of the resources in the community, and we'd be happy to share that information. Okay, so then I broke it down for like each specific age group. So this is really helpful for those of us who have kids in different age ranges that you're going to have to speak to. Number one, make sure that if you have more than one child that you're addressing, that you have a scheduled special meeting with each one of them face to face. Not like a group conversation, but more like an individualized session for each one of those kiddos, because you're going to want to taper it and make sure that you are gearing it specifically to their age. And you want to make sure that they feel the ability to be open and honest about any questions that they might have. If you put kids together in a group and you're trying to like communicate that to them, they're going to be great initially, but you know, the quiet kid is going to be the one who's in the background thinking things, but afraid to say them out loud because the older kid is going to like interrupt and interject, and it usually doesn't go very well. So making sure that you have that one-on-one time is perfect. Again, with kiddos who are like age 3 to 4, that's preschool range, I try to get down on their level, make direct eye contact with them, provide very specific examples, like my hands get shaky, or it's hard for me to stand up or sit down on my own. You know, talking about how the disease impacts your body. Another thing is using visual aids, books, or pictures. I know that was something that was brought to my attention, that there's actually a constituent, I guess, who has written a book for kids specifically about Parkinson's. How amazing is that? You know, so that would be certainly a visual aid that I would encourage using. Any kind of books or literature that you can find that has lots of pictures. Kids relate really well to pictures. And if they can't tell you how they're feeling, they can usually illustrate it through either play or art. You know, that's another thing. If I'm working with a kid and I say, okay, well, if you can't use your words to tell me how you feel, can you draw me a picture? And usually 9 times out of 10, they are much better at illustrating how they feel in a picture than by putting words to it. So that's really helpful with the little ones. With school age kids, say age 5 to 9, you're going to want to use very concrete examples. You're going to want to give specifics, and you're going to want to make sure that you say things like, you know, that could change day to day, because they're definitely going to be looking for patterns of behavior. And then they're going to look to you for guidance on that. Does that happen every day? Do you always feel tired? Do you always get frustrated when this happens? You know, just be open and honest as much as you can. Recognizing the importance of social pressure at this age 5 to 9, wanting to fit in, be liked, be popular. They don't want to be different in any way. It's super important to them that they look normal, whatever normal is. So if they say things to you like, I don't want you to come and see me at my play, ask yourself why they might be wanting that. What, you know, what are your concerns? What are some things that you might be upset about? Or they might say things like, I don't want Jimmy or Bobby to come to the house anymore. And they're not going to say to you, I'm embarrassed, I don't want Jimmy or Bobby to know that there's something wrong with you. Or I don't want them asking me a bunch of questions about why you shake or do this, that, or the other. But making sure that they feel okay and safe in that space to say those types of things. And I guess really trying to be empathetic to that. Although my first thought would be, well, that's really selfish of you. But when you get into the mindset of somebody at that age, it's super important that they fit in. And if for whatever reason they think that your illness or your disease is going to make them stick out, then they're not going to want that. So as hard as that conversation may be to have, kind of problem solving around that. Well, okay, what could I do to make you feel more comfortable? Or would it be okay if I came and sat in the back while I watched the performance? And, I won't stick around to see your friends when they come up to congratulate you at the end, or whatever's going to make them more comfortable. And I promise it's just for a little period of time. And then after that, they usually get more comfortable and then they're going to be over it. But it's that initial gut wrenching, like you can feel it in your gut when they say things like that. I get that all the time from my teenagers. Like, Mom, I don't want you to come. I don't want to be embarrassed. You're so outspoken and you're so, you have such a loud laugh. I get that a lot too. I have a very loud laugh, apparently. So when I'm at a school function and I laugh really loud, it's embarrassing to them. So now that it's been brought to my attention, I try really hard not to laugh. But, that's just how they are at that age. They're just very particular. And then we get in with the adolescents, so age 10 to 19. So using more common medical terms, making sure that you leave lots of room for questions, acknowledge and validate their emotions, no matter how selfish they may be. Again, they're very person-centered. Like, how is this going to impact me specifically? So does this mean that you're not going to be able to drive me to school anymore? Does this mean that you aren't going to be able to do this, that, or the other? I can't think of specific examples other than that, but usually it's very me focused in adolescence. Remember that we fear that which we do not understand, and that often kids, and this happens a lot, when they are afraid of something, when they're fearful, it's going to come out as anger. It's going to come out as irritability. And you're going to think, oh my gosh, what is happening to this child? They've become a demon. Really, they haven't. It's just that they have not put their fear into words. They haven't processed it. And so it's coming out as irritability. I don't know if anybody has anxiety as like a diagnosis, but people who have generalized anxiety, usually, especially with adolescents and adults, it comes out like irritability. So generally when my teenagers are acting really grumpy or irritable about something, chances are they're anxious about something that either happened at school or something that's coming up in school. And I don't press too hard, but just enough so that they know I'm concerned. Like, what's going on with you? You seem kind of out of sorts today. Did you have a bad day? Things like that, kind of normalizing it for them. We all have bad days. If you're having a bad day, that's okay. I'll leave you alone. I won't ask any more questions, but just know that I'm here if you need to talk. Leaving that door open. Teenagers especially really appreciate that. Children may not know how they feel, let alone be able to verbalize it. Get them to sit with their feelings, but don't press them. Leaving the door open for additional questions, making sure that you create a safe space for them. Encouraging them to talk to their friends and peers, especially if they don't want to talk to you. Giving guidance on additional support groups, and then proposing ways that they can learn more. So giving them very specific tasks that they can do. I know especially with my teenagers, they like to do hands-on stuff like volunteering in different organizations or fundraising. If you give them a very specific task, they're going to take it and run. Whereas the younger kids might want to do more like psychoeducational type stuff. So doing presentations in school about the illness, or, talking about things that they have experienced with their family member or loved one that's going through a chronic illness. And then that brings attention and awareness, and it also helps them to kind of like get that validation that they need from other people that it's going to be okay. Offering reassurances, even if you're scared yourself, that's really, really hard. I know as an adult, that's probably one of the most difficult things to navigate. When you have all of this stuff going on in your own life, and then on top of that, you're trying to help kids process that, that's really, really hard. Letting them know that you're human is super important. I mean, we all like to remember or think that we are like superheroes, but we're not. We're human beings. And at the end of the day, I take my cape off and put it away in my dresser, just like every other mom out there. But I need my kids to know that I'm also a human being and I have feelings. So if I'm scared about something and they ask, I'm going to be like, yeah, you know what? I am. I'm scared, but it's going to be okay. And we're a team and we're going to work through this together. I'm going to be okay. And I've got great support. Your dad's got me. Grandma's got me. We're all going to be okay. You know, just providing them that reassurance. Kids also need a lot with consistency. So making sure that you maintain their schedule and routine as much as possible. They really do thrive on schedule and structure, even though they're going to say that they don't like it, they love it. And anytime that you take that away from a kid, there's going to be pushback. So if there's any changes or alterations in their schedule, or if there's things that have to be changed around because accommodations need to be made for various reasons, you know, making sure that they have some sort of a say in how that's going to go down, and, you know, making sure that they are aware of what's going to happen before it happens, but trying to be as consistently on task with their normal routine as possible. Another pet peeve of mine, specifically with chronic illness, is saying things like, I don't know. If you don't know, that's fine. You don't have to know, but you can say, let's look that up, or I'm not sure. You know, I've even had some of my patients who have chronic illness schedule appointments for some of their older kids to come in and ask questions of their doctor or specialist. And of course, letting the provider know that that's what's happening before the appointment is scheduled, so that they are prepared for it. But sometimes kids need to hear that from sources other than mom or dad or grandma or grandpa. You know, so if they hear a medical professional say it, then it might have more weight to it. We hear that all the time. I do, especially in therapy. You know, mom and dad bringing a teenager in for depression or anxiety or something going on in their life. They don't want to talk to mom and dad about it. Mom and dad will say, well, I really think you should do X, Y, and Z. And the kid will be like, no, I'm not going to do that. But if I say that as their therapist, they're going to go, yeah, that's a great idea. You know why? Because I'm not mom and dad. So if you bring somebody else into the fold who can kind of partner with you, that's really helpful for kids too. They really need to know that you've got a team. Some of them are common emotions that I think have come up a lot with kiddos when they're dealing with a loved one who has a chronic illness. Initially, I know it sounds crazy, but shame. They might be ashamed, right? Because they don't understand it. They might be self-conscious. They might be anxious. They're going to be stressed out. They're going to be sad. You know, you think about illness, it's kind of like the loss of something, and you're grappling with that. You're going through all the stages of grief, you know. So if anyone's ever had like intro to psych, that's one of the stages of grief that we talk about is Kubler-Ross. You go through all of these stages like denial and anger, and, you know, eventually you come to realization and acceptance. Well, kids go through all of that with a chronic illness too. You go through that if you're the one who's received the diagnosis. You know, initially you might be like, nah, no, not me, I'm going to be fine. And then the reality sets in, and then you're sad about it, and then you're angry, and then you're frustrated, and then you're weepy. All of those emotions are valid because you're grieving the loss of something, right? Same things goes with kids when they're experiencing all of those feelings and emotions. it's going to be the same thing. They might also experience some loneliness because especially if the loved one is a parent and the other parent is helping as a caregiver, they might be kind of doing a lot together and the child might feel left out. Like, you know, you're always helping mom, or you and mom are always together, but I never feel like I'm included in those things. Because as a caregiver, that's what we do. But kids don't understand that, and they're vying for attention. You know, so anytime that you can just have one-on-one time with that child, even if it's just 15 minutes out of the day, that's still 15 minutes out of the day. I guarantee you that kid is going to feel on top of the world, just having that alone time with you. They're also going to be worried about things like, you know, is this something that I can get myself? Maybe feeling overwhelmed, like some of the older teenagers that I work with who have parents who have a chronic illness, you know, dealing with some caregiving responsibilities, whether it means like they're helping out mom or dad because they can't help themselves, or if they're helping out with other things around the house, like helping out with additional chores or looking after the younger siblings. That's a lot for a kid to take on, you know, so being very conscious of that, and then offering strategies and things that and tools that they can use to, you know, communicate when they've had too much, like I need a timeout, or, you know, give them something to look forward to on the weekend. Is this too much for you? Do you want me to have Aunt Patty come over and help? You know, how can I support you? I know that you have that huge paper coming up. What can I do to help? I know this is a lot. I'm asking so much of you. And usually they're going to be very open and honest with you about what they need in those situations. They also might be frustrated with activity restrictions, not wanting to bring to you. And most of all, trying to be fully present when you are together. So hugs, kisses, you know, lots of physical contact, if they're okay with that. If it's a teenager, you might want to ask permission first. That's something that they don't really like. Well, most teenagers. Making sure that you're asking questions about their thoughts and their feelings. And then just letting them know that you're there. Continuity, that's huge. Having family meetings. I know in my household, we have dinner as a family together every night, even on nights like tonight where I'm working late. My family waits for me. And so when I get home tonight, we're all going to have dinner together. No phones, no electronics. How was your day? How was your day? How was school? Blah, blah, blah. Using that time to come together as a family and really talking about things. They need that. They really need that touch point with you. Some families that I work with make it more formal too. Like I have one family that I work with who's very large. There's 10 kids in this family. And so everybody always has something that they want to say. So they have taken to writing things down, like questions that they want to address or problems that they're having in the household. And they write it down on a piece of paper and they put it in a jar, in the jars on the middle of the table. And then every family meeting, they take one note and then they read it out loud. And if it's a question or a concern or whatever, that's all they talk about for the half-hour family meeting. And I love that idea because it's very democratic, right? You're giving everybody an opportunity to kind of pitch in and ask questions in a very non-confrontational way. You don't even have to put your name on it. They don't even have to know that that was you that wrote the question. So that might be a way that you could address some of the questions or concerns that they have that maybe they're too afraid to come to you and ask. I used to have a sex ed class like that too. Our sex ed teacher was fantastic and was like, look, I understand you don't want to raise your hand in class and ask these questions. Write it down, put it in the jar. I'll read the questions out loud every day. And she did. And every once in a while, you could tell who asked the question because their face would turn really red. But for the most part, in family meetings, everything's game. Nobody's going to know. Supporting and empowering through volunteer work, research, fundraisers, that's super important too. Although I am a trained expert, I will say to you the same thing that I say to every other family and parent that I work with. ultimately, you are the expert on your child or if something is off, something's off. It's probably worth looking into, talking to them about, asking questions. And if you feel lost or don't know how to approach it, reach out to somebody like me or another professional and just, hey, this is what's going on and I could really use some help, some guidance in this area. You don't even have to schedule a formal appointment with me. Even if you just wanted to send me an email with a question or concern, I'd be happy to steer you in the right direction or provide you with as much information as possible, that I have on that particular subject area. And then last, of course, but not least, is making sure that kids have access to additional resources. So the Parkinson's, there was like a Parkinson's website, I've got it at the end of my references, that had a list of all of these fantastic resources, different books and things, articles as well, that I thought would be really helpful for families to have. I've not read any of these personally, but I bet you that they're all very amazing. And then, of course, my contact information at the end of the PowerPoint. If you guys have any questions or concerns that come up after tonight, feel free to shoot me an email, or you can call me or send me a text, whatever works best. And that's pretty much all I got on this end. So if you guys have any questions, I would be happy to field any questions that you might have.